when you began to meditate, I was interested to read that you had certain visions. I remember you saying that you, in fact, had a vision of the Virgin Mary.
Right.
Now, that would be very interesting for a Christian who was meditating
Yes.
and had a vision of the Virgin Mary, would obviously interpret it very differently from you. How did you interpret it? What was happening?
Well, I took it that it was probably an image, coming up from my subconscious mind as a result of my familiarity with Western art. I think the particular image of the Virgin Mary which I saw very much resembled some of the paintings of Murillo, the Spanish painter.
Yes.
I think it's the Immaculate Conception with the seven stars, and so you probably know
I know it very well.
Yes.
Neurologists tell us, of course, that hallucination is a perfectly normal function. It's going on all the time, but inhibited by our the rational parts of us. So perhaps your meditations were loosening up some of the rational controls.
It could be. It could be. I was rather surprised to see, this image of the Virgin Mary, as it were, floating before me. It was a very vivid experience. I saw the.
Was it
the
helpful?
figure. It wasn't unhelpful. I was surprised. I wasn't disturbed, and I took it simply that it was a sign of progress in concentration and meditation.
That you were achieving a higher state.
Well, no, that deeper levels were being tapped. I wouldn't say at that stage that higher levels were being approached.
But there was another occasion where you had a very much more significant, even frightening religious experience when you had a vision of Ramakrishna.
That's true.
Now, could you tell me what it was? Who is Ramakrishna first?
Well, Ramakrishna was a quite famous Hindu religious teacher living in and near Calcutta in the last century. The famous Swami Vivekananda was a disciple of his.
Yes.
And Ramakrishna was a great meditator. He had many visions of gods and goddesses, and he realized the ultimate truth. So I was very familiar with his teachings, and many of my friends were monks in that particular order.
So when you saw him, what did you feel? Was he as I see you now?
Yes, he was as you see me now, but he was very much bigger. He was in perhaps 2 or 3 times normal size, and he appeared as I had seen him in books.
But you felt something, not just surprise at seeing the Virgin Mary, but
this was a feeling, in a sense. Perhaps fear isn't the quite word. It was more a feeling of awe, or perhaps of the numinous.
That I was going to ask you. A lot of people have said that there is an experience of God which consists in a sense of presence, a sense of holiness. They call it a numinous experience. Would you say, I know you wouldn't say that it was an experience of God in any form, but that was a realization of the holy, the transcendent?
I knew that Ramakrishna was a holy man. I can't say that was an experience of the holy, not even of the holy in the form of Ramakrishna, but it was certainly a numinous type of experience, an experience of that particular type.
And it was induced by a lot of meditation?
I perhaps wouldn't say induced, but a lot of meditation perhaps prepared the ground for that sort of experience, which again was not what I was expecting, even though I was living at that time in a monastery belonging to that particular order of Ramakrishna.
You also had a vision of the Buddha about 30 years ago, which was vitally important to you. Can you describe it?
As you say, it was 30 years ago, but I think I can recall the main features. I had this vision at night. I was living in a cave at that time, so it was pitch dark, but nonetheless, the cave was brilliantly lit up. In fact, there was, so to speak, nothing but light.
Light filled the cave?
Light filled the cave. In fact, I wasn't conscious of the cave at all.
And in the middle of it was the Buddha?
I was conscious only of a vast expanse of light. And in the midst of this light, there was the figure of the red Buddha.
Red? Why red?
In Buddhism, especially in the Mahayana and Vajrayana, that is to say the more, as it were, archetypal forms of Buddhism, there are 4 Buddhas of the four directions of space. The red Buddha is Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite light. And he is especially associated with the Western direction. So inasmuch as I saw a red Buddha figure at the center of this light, I subsequently identified the vision as a vision of Amitabha.
What did you feel?
Well, of course, I was, in a sense, overwhelmed. I was very deeply impressed. I was very pleased. In fact, I was quite ecstatic.
Yes.
I was very happy to see that vision.
Why? I mean, I can imagine it was a blissful experience. Was there any special reason why?
There was a special reason, because the experience did seem to have a special significance in view of the time at which it took place, the circumstances under which it took place. Inasmuch as I had been living in South India, in fact wandering around South India, as a sort of freelance wandering monk for about 2 years. I'd been living in hermitages, living in caves. I'd been practicing meditation. I'd been studying the few Buddhist texts that I had with me. I wanted to find out whether I really could lead a Buddhist life, especially whether I could be a Buddhist monk and should seek formal ordination. So to me, this particular vision had the significance of saying, yes, you're ready. You should now seek ordination.
So that must have given you an enormous sense of happiness and confirmation, really.
It certainly did. It was a confirmation. It was a sort of blessing, one might say, on my endeavors so far. This is how I took it.
Who was blessing you? It couldn't have been the Buddha blessing you.
Well, you see, when one experiences visions, one doesn't at the time subject them to theological analysis or even psychological analysis. At that particular time, when I had the vision, I had the experience, I was only conscious of the light, conscious of the red Buddha in the midst of that light. Everything else was subsequent, by way, you may say, of interpretation. But this is the way I interpreted it, as encouragement, as a sign, if you like, that I was on the right path, that I was able to follow that path and should continue to follow it.
It was a sort of message from one part of yourself to another.
One could put it even in that sort of way, that one must be careful about self. It's self, if one uses that term at all, in a very wide sense, a very deep sense, as embracing all sorts of levels, all sorts of heights, all sorts of depths that very often modern psychology in the West doesn't recognize.
Yes, I see. This vision was actually terribly important to you. It was important to your development as a human being, as a Buddhist.
I would say it was quite crucial, at least insofar as the externals of my development were concerned.
Yes. Christian visionaries too, don't they, in the course of meditation, often have visions of the Virgin Mary, of Jesus Christ. Do you think we're talking about the same type of mysticism that produce the same kind of thought processes that produce these effects?
Well, visions are a very common experience. Yes, one certainly finds them in the experience of Christian mystics, whether of the Eastern Orthodox Church or of the Catholic Church. Even some Protestants have them. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said even some Protestants, but some Protestants have them. William Blake had them.
Are they necessary, or are they a treat, perhaps, a special treat, an extra, a luxury in the spiritual life?
They're not necessary in the sense that you cannot or do not make progress unless you have visions. There are people whom I know who are well advanced on the spiritual path, but who have never had a vision.